So while everyone's grabbing their seats, I'm just going to introduce myself real quick. My name is Mike Nagel. I am the Customer Marketing Manager for EverTrue, and this is a really weird position for me because last year I was a Raise attendee. I spent the last 6.5 years working in advancement communications at Phillips Exeter Academy, which is a prep school up in New Hampshire, and I absolutely love what you do. So I'm so excited to be here and to be here at Raise again for year 2. Who else was here year 1? Round of applause, show of hands, whatnot. Awesome. Thank you for coming back. We are so excited. So we're going to get started with this next session, which is going to just be 2 guys hanging out on stage talking about the annual fund. And if your finger has been on the pulse of the advancement industry, then you've heard some rumblings of really great things, exciting things happening down at Storrs, Connecticut at the University of UConn. Yes, woo, UConn. So we're so excited to be joined on stage by Josh Newton, who is the president and CEO of the UConn Foundation. Give him a warm Raise welcome. So Josh has been at UConn since 2013, where he's continuing to build the institution's profile as one of the top public universities in the country. He's taking the school from $60 million in annual fundraising, shooting for a goal of $100 million a year. And then prior to that, he was the VP of Development at Emory. But Josh really got his start in fundraising at Belmont Abbey College, where he was a student phone-a-thon caller. So he's been doing it ever since. So round of applause for Josh. So Josh, you got started at an early age, and why advancement? Why philanthropy?
First of all, thanks for the invitation. I want to thank Brent, the EverTrue team, and Mike for having me. I am not able to stay tonight for the big party. So it sounds like it's going to be a good time. Maybe the best conference I've been to, I went to the men's room and they have Advil in a basket. So the party looks like it's going to be a good time tonight.
Stock up now.
Clearly you have to wear bright colored pants also to work at EverTrue. I didn't wear my tie or shave today, but I'm glad to be here. So my story did start at my alma mater, Belmont Abbey College in North Carolina, where I attended. I was a scholarship kid. Neither of my parents went to college. My mom didn't finish high school, and I was grateful. I was grateful for the experience, grateful to be there, and I needed money. I needed income. So I had a work-study job in the registrar's office. I was an admissions tour guide, but then I worked in the phone-a-thon program, and it was in that program that I really developed a mentor, Joe Singleton, who at the time was heading institutional advancement. I had no idea what it was, but I enjoyed it, and it made me feel that I was giving back. And it was my start, and it's been the only thing I've done professionally, from telefund to running special events programs, annual giving, major gifts, and campaigns. So it really has been my commitment to pay it forward, to give back, to support others, and to make sure that anyone who wants to go to college, regardless of their background or situation, have the ability to do it. So I come to this business and this profession with a true passion for what I do, and the work that we're now doing at UConn in terms of now blowing up the business a little bit and trying some things different.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. I mean, this conversation, and I think we can all relate to why you do what you do, because that resonates in our hearts and our lives as well. But it's kind of interesting that you'd start in the phone-a-thon in this traditional annual fund role, and then last year you killed the annual fund at UConn. So tell us more.
So I was asked to talk a little bit about the motivation that led to this, and to tell the story is to say this is something I've been thinking for the better part of a decade, right? So maybe a little audience participation or non-participation, we'll see. So how many of you still have a home phone? A few hands, all right? How many of you often, when you fill out a form, give your mobile number as your home phone, right? I see a lot of hands, right? How many of you answer a call on your mobile phone if the name of someone in your contacts doesn't show up, it's just a phone number? How many of you answer that call?
You must work in annual giving.
I've got 4 hands, 5 hands, right? Okay, how many of, and we're in the business, how many of you, when you go home at night and open that mail, when you know you've got a solicitation, how many of you actually open those solicitations that you get that we actually send out to our alums? Right? Because you want to see what's in them.
You want to copy and steal everything.
You want to copy and steal everything. There you go. So for me, it was, I saw a decade or so ago trends away from the traditional model of annual giving. What I call the 40-year paved road we've been on of traditional direct mail, phone-a-thon programs, layered in the last decade with strong email. We've tried other things like QR codes and text to give that haven't really stuck, right?
Yeah.
But there seems to be a trend away from a lot of the things that have been traditional to our business. So then in leadership roles, major gifts, principal gifts, and leading an organization, I show up in individuals' office or go to cocktail parties where people say, I know that number, and I know when that number shows up and I don't answer the phone. Or, why are you still calling me, right? You know I give, I'm still getting the call, I'm still getting the mail. Stop it, right? And what is my annual fund director at the time? What do they tell you back in your offices? You can't do that.
Yeah.
You know, there are these, people make second gifts. Telefund is still the #1 acquisition method in our business. You have to keep doing these things.
What are we going to do in October if we don't send a postcard?
Exactly. We've got to do our 5 direct mails. We've got to run our phone-a-thon programs. But to me, it didn't seem to be working. Not only did it not seem to be working, in my last role, probably the biggest debate, I won't call it an argument, that I had with my former boss is at the end of a fiscal year, so maybe I should ask you, if at the end of your fiscal year, dollars are up and donors are down, do you care? Okay? So the argument I had with my boss at the time was dollars were up and donors were down. And the comment back to me was, I don't care. Yeah. As long as dollars continue to go up, I'm less concerned about the base.
Well, and I think as an industry, for the last 30 years, we've seen that happening. Dollars are going up, but donors are going down across the board. So do we care? So many of you,
do you know the Educational Advisory Board, EAB? They've come out with a lot of studies. So in their last study, they said that the number of alumni in the last decade, we're graduating larger classes today than we ever have before, the number of alumni in the last decade has grown by 34% in the US. There are 34% more alumni in the US. There are 15% less donors in the same decade, right? So I began to see that at my last institution, and I certainly, in the 4 years I've been at UConn, we have what I call we're bleeding at the bottom end. Mm-hmm. We've lost about 2,000 donors per year, the 4 years I've been there. So we're down essentially 8,000 donors. And it's that definition of insanity. Am I going to keep doing the same things over and over? And why didn't I make the decision before? One, I wasn't in the lead role. Now I've been able to kind of drive some of those conversations and decisions. But two, I said something has to change dramatically. Yeah. And the reason I didn't before is I think we all kind of embrace the message, it's time to do it different. It's time to look differently at our programs. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what the answer was if it wasn't the 5 direct mails, the phone-a-thon program layered in with email. Okay, so I'm going to blow it up.
Yeah. Well, you must have had some ideas because we brought you here to speak. So hopefully... So what did you do last fall, and how did you get to that decision?
So after years of thinking about it, and now in a lead role, having addressed other issues at the organization after I got there the first couple of years, I said it's time, right? And again, people have asked me, why in your role as president and CEO of the foundation do you care about annual giving?
Yeah.
Well, the easy answer to that is, if I don't care about annual giving, then where is my base for the future, right? I have to continue to build my base if we're going to build long-term sustainable. If I was only concerned about, my tenure, the next 5-10 years, however long I'm there, then I'm going to churn and burn major gifts, principal gifts, right? Big dollars. But if I'm concerned about building a strong, sustainable, long-term organization with strong support from its alumni and other populations, this needs to be fixed, and we have to begin to do this a different way. So I scoured looking for someone to come in to help me figure out what is the path forward. And I ended up hiring a firm out of San Francisco. They also had offices in New York, but they're unknown to our sector. They're not a consulting firm you would know. They're not somebody that sounds common. And when I found them, they are a UX design firm. Do you know UX
Anyone
design?
know UX?
Raise your hand. There should be. Okay. I didn't know what UX design was a year and a half ago. It's about user experience, right? User experience, UX design firm. They came in, and unlike a traditional consulting gig, they actually came in an intensive 4 months. They basically were around all the time. They were digging through our data. They were meeting with our teams. We were doing brainstorming, Post-it notes everywhere. But what they did is they started talking about things like personas and journey maps and things that I had never heard about 20 years in the business.
Right.
What is all this stuff, and what does this mean to our business? The hardest part, and I think I should address it up front, right? The hardest part was our deans. What about the deans, right? Because I have felt at universities that we have been primarily school-based development operations, right? We often serve the schools and units of the university rather than maybe serve the needs and interests of our alumni community.
Right.
So we began talking about, rather than maybe the general fund in the fall and the dean's fund appeal in the spring, layered in with phone and email and all of those things, okay, maybe we're gonna start talking to alums in ways they want to be communicated with. Maybe they're going to tell us what they're interested in, and we're going to begin to look at behaviors and things like micro-targeting and personal communication and trying to scale a completely different model of how we're looking at annual giving.
And so, I mean, it's kind of like something that we would experience in our daily lives, where like last week I got an email from Southwest that said, hey, here's how many miles you've traveled this year, here's where you've been, here's how much you've saved on bag fees. And they're just, that was all the email was, but it knows who I am, it sent it right after a trip, right leading up into another trip.
Yeah, so my team hears it all the time back at the foundation, but I said, Open Table sent me an email on the 5-year anniversary of my first reservation, right? Congratulations on the 5-year anniversary of your first Open Table. When I go in a Starwood hotel, they have the beer I like in a bucket or gummy bears. Yeah, I like gummy bears.
You like beer and gummy bears?
Beer and gummy bears. It's a
that would
nice
be a great party tonight. You're missing out.
Absolutely, beer and gummy bears. So I'm like, okay, so the hotel chain I stay in or Open Table that I happen to reserve treats me better than an organization I give money to, right? That I freely. Do you think every donor on the anniversary of their first gift, their 5 and 10 year, do we have programs that are sustained in a way that communicate with them? No, we email donors who for 13 years have given to support our women's basketball program, and we ask them to give to the School of Social Work Dean's Fund because that's what we're told we have to do.
Yeah.
Right? And we're not willing to break the model or step outside the box and even listen to them screaming at us through social media, through patterns of giving, through other things that they're already telling us and showing us they care about. So they're liking things on our Facebook page. They're retweeting things. They're saying, I care about human rights because you just got a gift and you have a challenge and wow, that's exciting. But we don't ask them to give to human rights because we ask them to give to the engineering dean's fund because they're an engineering graduate. Because that's the way our traditional annual giving models have worked. So this firm basically said, your model's all wrong, right? Your annual giving program, as it was called, we no longer have an Office of Annual Giving. He said we killed it. We have an office of...
Did you have a service for it? Like a funeral?
We had a funeral, yeah, no. We have an Office of Engagement and Acquisition. I have a new director of digital, editorial. Our stewardship office is under marketing communications. But we also now are looking at data in a different way. And we are slicing every way possible how our donors have given. You know, before we were happy with the first to second year retention rate. I mean, I was on with another firm yesterday, a vendor, who was telling me, we can work with you and your current donor population and get twice the renewal rate of the national average. We can get you a 35% retention rate first to second year donor, and that's twice the national average. And I'm going, when did we settle for a 35% retention rate of first to second year donors?
That's a 3-year cycle of losing every donor. That's incredible.
So we put all this energy and effort into bringing donors in to the institution. We treat them generically in return, and we are happy with a 35% return, rather than saying, what did that person say to us through their first gift, through how they engage with us, through other communication methods, and how are we going to communicate back to them? Not that we're going to drop them in our Dean's Fund or General Appeals or phone-a-thon programs. So I made multiple decisions across the institution. We're still putting it back together, if you will. So we did cut our phone-a-thon program in half in the middle of last year. We have further cut the program back, and right now I'm only calling you in the current fiscal year if you have given by phone in the past within the last 5 years, right? That was the initial. We may look beyond that, and we may look at some things, but those young alums and older alums who I run into cocktail parties are starting to say, that number isn't showing up anymore. I'm not getting those calls, but I'm noticing other types of communication coming my way. So it's trying to compartmentalize, individualize, and micro-target our populations.
Yeah, so with this Office of Engagement and Acquisition, I mean, how does that operate, and what are some of the other things that you've changed?
Our director is sitting right there in the front row. I should call on her. But so we took what before was digital engagement, right, in a communications office, and we are now actually looking at engagement and acquisition as a continuum, right? So engagement and acquisition supports both our alumni office, but it also supports our development office. And within that, we now have a director of business intelligence who's actually looking at who should be invited to what event, what communication should each donor get. And no longer will there be the 5 direct mails through the year or the calling program that's generalized. Everything will be customized to the individual constituent.
So it's looking, you mentioned user journeys earlier, so it's looking holistically at the life of like one of our alums, from maybe even the time of application to UConn, student, graduation, and on until they get to planned giving.
Yeah, and again, for those, I mean, if you would have had me up here at last year's conference, right, which was in July, we had just hired that firm and talked about a user journey, I'd have been like, I'm not quite sure what you're talking about, right? User journeys, personas. Now it's a part of our daily conversation. We talk about user journeys all the time. We talk about different ways to communicate with not just different generations, but literally different individual subsets of our population, because we're trying to follow them on, you know, again, I talk about the history grad who went to work for the environmental agency, who joined the board of their theater company in their community, whose spouse had a bout with breast cancer. The 3 things they care most about in life, right? Environmental, arts, theater, and breast cancer research, we do at UConn.
Yeah.
I'm soliciting them for the CLAS Dean's Fund appeal. I'm not asking them for any of those things, and they're no longer giving to us. They're giving to other organizations and institutions that they care about because they don't see their alma maters as a place that they can have that impact.
So it's about creating an intersection of a donor's interest and a UConn need, and say you can be a part of that.
Absolutely. And clearly, part of the reason I'm up here is that EverTrue's been a part of that for us. I mean, there's kind of a dual purpose for us. EverTrue has also become our mobile platform, interfacing with our database system. But for me, it's about looking at all the behaviors of our alumni around event engagement, around communication, and around solicitation, and thinking differently. And to get back to that point, that oftentimes we feel, I think many of you, that we feel we serve at the pleasure of the deans, right? I actually went to, the provost invited me to a dean's council meeting, and I stood up in front of the deans and I said, we're blowing up the annual fund. We're not going to do it the same way. We're not going to talk about an annual fund. Those appeals you sign off on aren't going to happen in the same way. We're going to do it different, right? And
What did they say?
It may not surprise you. There was a lot of quiet in the room, and they're like, is this guy crazy, right? And I said, questions, thoughts, concerns, and to no surprise, our business school dean, our head of business is over here, our business school dean raised his hand and he said, Josh, he said, I'm with you. He said, I see what you're saying, I see where you're going, but help bring us along with you.
Yeah.
Right? I'm an academic, I'm a dean, I've been taught as a dean to be accustomed to certain things. You're now telling me those things aren't going to exist anymore. So how am I going to acquire new donors? How am I going to access? You mean my alum may give to some other area of the university? And I said, yes, that's exactly what I mean. But there are other alums of other schools who may give to your school, right? And he said, I'm with you, I'm behind you, and I will be, and he said this at a Dean's Council meeting in front of the other deans, but remember to continue to educate us as you continue to implement this program.
Yeah.
And I'm going back in front of them this fall, along with the president's cabinet of the university, and I'm actually gonna show them, as we think about a campaign, I'm gonna show them gifts of $100,000 and more, right? And the impact they've had on our institution versus gifts of a penny up to $100,000. Yeah. And I'm going to say, I'm preparing those of you who work at UConn, I'm gonna say, it's not worth your time.
Yeah.
If it's not $100,000 and above, why are you touching it? Why are you reading and editing and sending me a 2-page email trying to rewrite your direct mail letter, right? Why are you doing that? Because direct mail still has a 1% response rate. Why are you as a dean, it's beneath you. That is not where we need you to spend your time if we're going to move this institution forward. And I think you have to be willing to say those challenging things to those audiences to have them understand this is something we're trying to fix. And we're being bold about how we're gonna fix it. But I need you to elevate here, to really focus at a different level and allow us to try some things different, and we are going to try different things, and things will fail. But I think our path forward is very exciting because that 40-year path we were on, that annual giving program we've all become used to, I think that 5 years from now, even what I'm talking about today will be outdated.
Yeah.
And we have to become accustomed and prepared for more constant change in our industry and our sector, and we have to be adaptable in a way. I was just at the Case Summit in San Francisco a couple weeks ago. I went to a level 5 session. It was the top leaders in our industry. And they said, as I walked in the room and they started going through this, the average level 5 leader in advancement is 60.5 years old.
So there's some job openings coming.
There's some job openings coming.
Okay, good.
I'm not 60.5 years old, and I think the creativity, the change in the path forward, we didn't know what it was. I didn't know what it was, but I was willing to take the risk.
Yeah.
I was willing to say it's time to think different.
Awesome, excellent. We have, is this exciting? Is this awesome? Yes. Whew, love Raise. We have time
I may be looking for a job soon. I'm not sure. I'll let you know.
We have time for one or two questions. We got down front here, all over. Awesome.
Hi, Patrick Rooney from MIT Sloan. A question for you. I know you mentioned about kind of if it's under the 100K threshold, it's not worth your time. And to quote your business dean, I totally get it. I'm behind you on that. But what are you doing to provide the kind of stepping stone for donors who aren't at that level yet? They want to give, and what are you doing to encourage them to give and encourage maybe a future $100,000 gift?
No, absolutely. I mean, that's part of why I blew up the program to begin with, is if you're losing 2,000 donors a year, every school's losing donors, right? Every program's losing donors. So for me, we have to fix it because we have to build the base for the future, which means you have to communicate differently with every donor going forward. Your $25 donor, your first-time donor, your 10-year consecutive donor at whatever level, and we're creating things. And again, if you heard my structure earlier, we put stewardship with engagement and acquisition and design and editorial and business intelligence. That's the marketing communications team. And we built a team that is putting into place scalable right? I can't treat every $25 first-time donor like I'm going to treat a $100,000 donor, but what I can do is treat them differently than I have historically, right? And that open table, congratulations on the 5-year anniversary of your first gift, I'm going to put tons of touch points into place that allow me to begin to communicate with them, sending them links to articles that are customized for things that they clicked on a Facebook page that they happen to like, right? So I'm trying to change everything we do in terms of our communication patterns and behaviors to change then their relationship back to us to feel more personal. Because go run your downgrade report in your system. The donor who did make the first, second, third, even fifth gift, I had donors who were up to $10,000 to a particular area who then went back to 5, and guess what? Nobody noticed. We have to notice those behaviors. We have to comment on those behaviors, and we have to begin to call them out and to celebrate as people come into our organization and get more involved, and call and follow up or go sit down when they begin to slide back, because they're probably not feeling the connectivity or attention they wanted to feel when they became a donor.
Right here in the front. It's about relationships. You know, if somebody stops calling or returning your text, you're going to change your strategy.
Absolutely.
So can you talk a little bit more about how you're engaging donors around what they care about? So your example of human rights. I come to you, I'm interested in human rights. How does that manifest itself in gift giving? Am I able to get that directed in the gift into something that UConn is doing?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll start from the beginning. First thing we're going to do is if you give to something at UConn, we're going to acknowledge you give to that and ask you to give to that rather than asking you to give to what happened to be our platform or standard solicitation plan. If we notice your behavior through whatever, by the way, we're also going to ask you what you care about, right? So we're going to give you opportunities to tell us and show us what you care about. But when you like on Facebook that post about the gift to human rights and transforming our Human Rights Center, when you retweet it or share it, when you make comments, and that tends to be where your pattern of behavior, then I'm going to reach out to you and say, are you interested in giving? I mean, a hot topic, I'll tell you, our provost came to us as we were going toward the end of the fiscal year with a lot that's going on politically. He said, sanctuary campuses, support for undocumented students is a big thing. We've had people on both sides of the conversation. You post that article on the UConn, not the UConn Foundation, Facebook page, and there are people who say, I'm never going to give to UConn again. And there are people who say, I've never been so proud of my alma mater. Well, I'm never going to do a broad-based solicitation to support undocumented students. But I now may have 532 people who hit the love or the like or the share or I've never been so proud. And I'm going to ask them if they might want to support a fund to give to undocumented students. So I'm going to be able to really micro-target our population by using these various tools in terms of how we outreach going forward.
This is so awesome. Do we have time for one more? We have time for one more question. Down here in front.
First of all, so you're validating something I brought up about 13 years ago when my unrestricted goal was increased by 10% when it hadn't grown by more than 1% for the previous 10 years.
It's because of what they needed.
Exactly.
Not what the donors
and so I
wanted.
said, why are we not letting people give to what they want to when that's just not the way the world works? So I'm really thrilled. I'm just curious about, because you're the big kahuna, so the resistance, but resources that it takes to execute this, and is there, when you keep on saying scalable, I know my phone program always asked for what the designation of the previous gift was. We don't ask by college anymore since at least I arrived. So trying to make headway that, and that our online gifts are equaling first-time donors as first-time donors in the phone program. So that's telling me things too. But how could I possibly do this when I don't have maybe the power and the resources that UConn has?
Well, I wasn't sure I had the powers or resources, so I made different decisions, right? I mean, I was spending, if I was spending X on my phone-a-thon program, I'm now spending Y. That Y is 6 figures. And I took that money and I put it towards other technologies, other programs, other services that are going to allow us to communicate in different ways. I no longer have an Office of Annual Giving. I blew up my Office of Annual Giving. I created staff positions on the other, but I also took staff positions and reinvested them on the operational budget side. I've had so many people say, I mean, the number of anonymous calls I've received in the last 6 months that I've vetted and members of my team have vetted, people are strongly curious about this path, and almost every person I've spoken with said to me, I have a great director of annual giving, but I'm really struggling to get them to embrace this new philosophy, right? So even if I embrace it, I may have people within my shop who don't embrace it, and what do? And I say, that's leadership, right? I had to make some very difficult decisions, some of the hardest in my career, but it was about moving our program forward and increasing support for the university.
And you and I talked about this a little bit in preparing for this session. And for somebody like myself, who's more a junior person, it's going up with that feedback, testing things out and reporting that it actually works, and then changing things from within that way. So
I'm sorry I went over.
No, this is fantastic.
I'll answer any questions after.
Josh will be here for a little bit.
Yep.
There are other members of the UConn team here as well, so if you spot them and you have other questions, please feel free to grab them. Raise is a family, and so we're all going to share as much as we know, but a big round of applause for Josh.
Thank you, everyone.
And the team at UConn.